Um, I'm just going to group my answers into three. I'm going to talk for a second about Sderot and Gaza, because we have that as a bundle of questions that I received. I'm going to talk about Israel's relationship with the United States, and I'm going to talk about Netanyahu. Okay? So those are the three questions or groups of questions that I'm going to answer. You know, it's very important to understand, and I think the majority of Israelis, particularly after the war in Lebanon, do understand that Gaza, as a result of the Israeli withdrawal, as people like myself, and people like myself made up millions of Israelis ahead of the withdrawal, not, you know, me, myself, and I, or me and my buddies, but millions of Israelis said that Gaza will turn into a base for global terrorism the minute that Israel left. And, you know, we were thinking maybe weeks, maybe months. It was literally minutes. Literally minutes. The settlements that were destroyed were transformed, in the case of Gush Katif and the southern settlements, into terror training bases, not only for Hamas and Fatah, but also for Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah and the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. And the northern settlements in Gaza that abut Ashkelon were turned into rocket launching sites against the western Negev. And it's important to understand that that is what the situation is in Gaza. President Bush, on September 20th, of 2001, said that the United States was going to prevent terrorists from having bases of operation anywhere on the globe. And by encouraging Israel to withdraw from Gaza, and now by encouraging, of course, Israel to continue on in Judea and Samaria, the United States has actively supported the establishment of a base for global jihad. Now, this is the most active base for global jihad you have. Everywhere else they tried to hide, and in Gaza you have parades with tens of thousands of jihadis on the streets calling death of Israel, death of America, and this is what's happening, you know, meters from Israeli kibbutzim and Sderot. So that is the situation in Gaza as we have it today. And rather than, and we have to deal with it, of course, you know, this cannot continue on, because all it does is further destabilize Israel, not only Israel, but, you know, also the entire world, because the minute that you have an enclave of terrorism in such a strategically important zone, you know, abutting Egypt and Israel in the Mediterranean Sea, this is a sea launching pad for jihadis. This has to be contended with. Now, the current government doesn't want to, because doing so involves acknowledging the fact that withdrawing from Gaza was really, really dumb. And they don't want to do that because all of Kadima is based upon that having been a smart move. And that's why they haven't been doing it until now. And they're trying to frighten the Israeli people by telling us that, you know, the first thing that we're going to lose 70 soldiers just like that. As if, you know, the job of soldiers was supposed to be, once upon a time, to protect the country, but now it's the country's job to protect soldiers. There's a little bit of moral confusion going on there, and I say this in spite of the fact that nobody wants any soldiers to die, God forbid, but we have to understand that their job is to defend the country. And so that's why we haven't had it, but I don't think that the situation, I think that now when you're having 30 and 40 and 50 missiles going off in Sderot and surrounding areas a day, and you're showing capabilities of reaching not only Ashkelon, but Ashdod and Kiryat Gat, Netivot, there's going to be a lot less quiescence on the part of the general public about what's happening in Gaza. And again, that together with Vinograd could either force the government to act or will force the government out. And the second thing that I said that I was going to talk about was U.S.-Israel relations and what will happen after the American presidential elections, or what might happen after the American presidential elections. Look, you know, what happens in the United States is deeply important to what happens in Israel, and of course, you know, Israeli intelligence officers would be remiss if they weren't looking at what's happening in the United States with extraordinary interest. In terms of the presidential race, in terms of Congress, what happened in 2006 after the 2006 elections to the Congress was a major blow to Israel. The Democrats took over Congress, and President Bush fired all of Israel's main allies in the administration, right? Don Rumsfeld, out. Bolton, out. Fife, was, I think, already gone, but you had this wellspring of resignations, forced and otherwise, from the administration of all of Israel's principal allies, and you had the president, even though he rejected it, actually going about and implementing the Baker-Hamilton recommendations, at least insofar as Israel is concerned. Luckily, he didn't do it in terms of Iraq. So you had a sea change in the Bush administration's policies, and that's a friendly administration. And that was the result of one loss in the congressional midterm elections. So yes, what happens in presidential elections is extremely important. If, an anti-war candidate is elected and the United States pulls its forces out of Iraq, then the entire region of the Middle East is going to be destabilized in a way we haven't seen, because you're going to have jihadists who have been fighting in Iraq, leaving Iraq in massive triumph, that they will have beaten the great Satan after they beat the Soviets, just as Osama bin Laden promised them that they would. And that kind of victory for the forces of jihad, is going to put them on the march. And where are they going to march? Well, they're going to march over the Hashemites, who they will crush, and they will come to Israel. They will come to Lebanon, they'll come to Israel, they'll come to Egypt, and they will seek the overthrow of the governments that are working with the United States on one level or another, and also they're going to work to kill as many Israelis as they possibly can. And so if you have an anti-war candidate who is elected, somebody who has committed himself or herself to leaving Iraq, it will be a very, very bad situation for Israel. And also, Israel will be putting itself into a position where, or may very well be placed in a position where it will also be blamed for these things, because the Democrats, if they come in, will say that it's not their fault, just as, it wasn't America's fault that Cambodia was overrun by Pol Pot, after the U.S. Withdrew from South Vietnam. So they won't be blaming themselves, they'll be looking for somebody else to blame. So Israel could be in a very uncomfortable situation.